Okay, so we're going to be talking about insecurities, which functions are the most insecure within us and the most likely to project. So these are usually the inferior, the fourth function, and the seventh functions, because these are one-dimensional functions. These are our least conscious functions and more likely unconscious. So what does that mean? This means that these functions have a tendency to be projected in a very negative, or as Jung would say, infantile manner. They are also less accurate in usage, and because they are less accurate, we have less confidence in their usage. Now, a good example of this would be like an INTJ, myself, and an FE. So I would typically assume the negative in people's behavior towards myself. Like, for example, that people hate me, or people are mad at me, or people are talking behind my back, or anything that is people related in a social way. It is usually through a negative lens, because I cannot really assume or guess the positive version of it. And this is actually tying to survival tendency. It is our tendency or instinct, really, to assume the worst case scenario first if we're stressed or if we are in fear. Because in a survival situation, we will most likely survive if we think of the worst case scenario first, and if it is to happen, we are prepared for that. Compared to, let's say, if we were thinking about the positive stuff and not thinking about like the worst case that could happen, then most likely in, let's say, a survival situation, you'll be eaten by a lion, and that could lead to death. So there's a survival instinct almost to think about these worst case scenario with our unconscious functions. Now, the issue with this in a more modern society or era would be like projection. The psychological theory behind projection is that because we are not confident in these functions, we usually project what we think onto other people. So, for example, again, FE would be like thinking that other people also assume negative things about me the way I assume negative things about them. Let me see. Let me try to find another example here. Or let's say somebody, because my FI as INTJ is 2D or tertiary, it is also not as developed. So, for example, this would be more in the case, I think, of like EXTPs and EXTJs with 1D FI. That, for example, their emotions are not as developed because it's so unconscious in the 1D. That this could lead to, let's say, extreme jealousies or attention-seeking behavior or whatever it is regarding a feeling tone or emotional base that is very childish or infantile. So they might project that other people have those same needs as them, and this could get them in trouble because other people might not even have that type of perspective like they do. Maybe other people are not as unconscious in their FI and such and such. So how do we get over this and develop ourselves is actually challenging our assumptions. We need to consciously actually put effort into recognizing that we are not forecasting or projecting a confident or positive view. So, for example, if it's our inferior and seventh function that are negative, then whatever thoughts we have or every situation that are similar to those functions, for example, SE or FE for me, like people related, FE, I would usually try to counter the negative projections or assumption. I would actually double check it, and I will have to double check it to make sure that it's accurate or not. And this requires a lot of conscious energy. This is why it requires a lot of conscious effort on my end to actually assume the positive and not the negative. So let's look at some theoretical cases per the functions. We're just going to go to the judging function stuff, but this will give you an idea of how to seek them out, and you can use your own examples. You can actually get a case like this by looking at the functions themselves in our other episode. But these are the examples of how each 1D functions played out, like an inferior, the fourth, and the seventh. So negative extroverted feeling, already explained earlier, would be like people's intentions in the worst case possible, the negative intention. People don't like you, people are talking behind your back, people are scheming behind you, people are not loyal to you, etc., etc. And then a negative introverted feeling is, again, like the childish emotional states and projecting that on other people, that they also need attention, maybe similar to you, and that they are not able to control their emotions similar to you, like EXTJs and EXTP. And then the negative extroverted thinking is like this would go for IXFJs and I think IXFPs. So you assume illogical causations in the external world. This is usually linked to the psychological effect of or defense of black and white thinking, where there's kind of like no in between. So, for example, if I don't get good grades, I am definitely going to fail in life. And that is a very simplistic view, that is a very simplistic TE. Because obviously there's so many more steps in the ways, right? But because their TE is so weak, the IXFJs and IXFP, they usually would jump from causation, cause and effect in the external world without any further detail. So if I don't get good grades, I'm going to forever be poor and drop out of uni or whatever and never get a good job. And then my life will be extremely bad. Now, when it comes to negative introverted thinking, this becomes also with the same dynamic as TE. It becomes too shallow. Instead of the cause and effect in the external world, it's going to be more of the connection points in terms of your ideas and concepts that you use to understand the world. For example, MBTI is extremely almost TI heavy subject because it's so abstract. So, for example, I noticed that a lot of ENFPs and MBTI servers would go off and very confidently tell people that they're mistyped, even if it goes against, some grounded theories such as, the Jungians or socionics, and they just don't follow that because their theoretical understanding might be too simplistic. Like you're not an INTJ. I've been accused. You're not an INTJ. You're an INFJ, and the reason for that from this ENFP was actually because you're good at socializing. Now, obviously, this is extremely narrow in terms of thought process because they're missing out on the developmental aspect. You see this a lot actually. Like if, for example, Darren Nardi or even I think Lijo, the INTJ, both of them are INTJs actually, they're accused of being other types just because of their development, and that's a lack of understanding. On the developmental theory, like people are not static. People do develop and grow and become multi-dimensionals, like this is why we have subtypes. So with just those understanding, right, like you don't really need a case per view, but by understanding the functions themselves, it's just a negative or infantile version of these functions. And then you can start noticing from a therapeutic standpoint when you're projecting and when other people are projecting as well. This is one of the theories that actually has a lot of potential for personal growth within the person, within yourself, and also to understand other people as well, to understand it from a socializing perspective and when other people are projecting onto you. This is a good theory to have in terms of understanding miscommunications or within conflicts, why people act the way they do, and allowing you to navigate the social arena more effectively because of this.